Hello everybody, Floppy Waffles 69 here. Welcome back to the channel, guys. Today we will be continuing our look at these Pan-Asian ships found within these neon containers, or these whatever Orders of Chaos or the Goodness containers, whatever the hell they're called, for the Lunar New Year. And now we have come to the Tier 9 Pan-Asian Battleship, the Sun Yat Sen. What is the Sun Yat Sen, guys? Basically, what you have here is you have a Soyuz hull, so Soviet hull, which is a really good hull, actually. With you dropping the 406s and picking up Kremlin 457s, but only the double-barreled variant, not the triple-barreled variant. With better Sigma and battle cruiser dispersion, this ship is quite the menace out on the seas. And I think that this ship gets a really bad rap for being inconsistent, which, let's be honest, which battleships really don't get trolley dispersion from time to time. I actually really much enjoy the Sun Yat Sen and think this is a bit of a dark horse ship. I think not enough people play this ship. I think not enough people know about this ship, and too many people think this ship is bad based on some pretty bad information out there. And hopefully I can help set that record straight on this particular ship, because I think this ship is a bit of a hidden gem, especially at Tier 9. I wouldn't go as far as saying this is one of, probably the best Tier 9 battleship, but probably one of the best Tier 9 BBs in the game currently. If I'm looking at this in direct comparison to something like the Ying Ming, which just came out, and that's like the other Pan-Asian battleship that a lot of people are seeking after, that has that magical spell about like nullifying torpedo damage by 70%, which is an absolute crock of shit, I think the ship is better. I actually think this ship is the better choice, because this ship is just going to fulfill that standard battleship role a little bit better. And something that isn't quite as tanky and solely reliant on a consumable to mitigate torpedo damage, just to me screams kind of like a one-trick pony aspect of something. And this is going to be, I guess, more universally useful in more situations. So I guess that's where it comes from, and that's kind of what I am, and kind of what I'm gauging it off of. So without further ado, guys, let's go on and get into this review. I have a lot to talk about, and I definitely want to showcase some pretty damn solid gameplay in this ship. So let's get on into it. Looking at the armor layout, again, this is a Soyuz hull, so you know right off the get-go you are going to A, have an exposed citadel on your broadside if you allow ships to get on your broadside, but 2, really damn tanky if you know how to angle your armor, and 3, your armor threshold is pretty much going to be able to shatter the vast majority of high explosive, especially looking at things from like a cruiser standpoint. 32mm nose. You have a 32mm ass with this 60mm casemate armor, which is essentially your deck. Upper belt of 375 and armor belt of 375 as well. Looking at the citadel, as you know, there it is. It is sitting above the waterline, and it can be hit and punished if you are, caught with your pants down, so to speak. Again, though, guys, the Soyuz hull is very tanky, very reliable, tested and true. I really like the Soyuz hull. It's a good platform. Again, it's not the best at tier 9, but it is pretty damn solid, so there's really no complaints here from me. Survivability of 80,900 with a torpedo protection damage of 35%. Again, pretty standard, not terrible, not like phenomenal. It's just solid. It's just all in all very solid. Going into the artillery of the 3x2 457mm guns. Very, very big guns, I guess, so to speak. Overmatch is certainly there. And also not to mention that the penetration of the large caliber armor piercing on these guns is very good too, especially at ranges. You are packing a 22.9 seconds with the build I am currently running. I am running reload mod, because if I can go ahead and get something from 26 down to 22.9. That's better for me, at least. I like that. Getting shells out faster and faster down range, especially when you only have 6 of them, is nice, especially with that battlecruiser dispersion. I find myself doing more damage more consistently more often with running the reload mod, rather than something else like the range mod, for an example, that's going to extend my battleship's main caliber, or not main caliber, main battery range by 16%. And I understand the reason why people would want to take this. For me, though, with where I am playing this ship, I'm going to find myself being within those ranges anyways of 19.2 kilometers, which I think is more than sufficient in the current meta. So I'm going to go ahead and just buff my reload rather than going ahead and taking range mod, extending the range out further, which is pretty unnecessary in my opinion. 180-degree turn time of 34.5 seconds as well. And again, I already mentioned that you do have a sigma value of 1.9 with battle cruiser dispersion. Very, very nice. You're going to find yourself landing more shells on target. Again, this isn't like the Georgia, because the Georgia, as theoretically speaking, has less sigma, but still with that battlecruiser dispersion, the Georgia can also go ahead and slot the artillery plotting room that all USN battleships can pretty much slot that tier. So theoretically speaking, the Georgia is still going to be a little bit more accurate than the Sun Yat Sen. But that being said, though, with the higher sigma value, the consistency of your shells landing in your ellipse that have already improved accuracy is very nice. Another thing to keep in mind about the Sun Yat Sen that I really find kind of like not many people talk about, the high explosive. The high explosive is pretty damn useful. 6,500 maximum damage with 45% chance to cause fires. 76 millimeters of penetration. Now let me set the record straight here. I am pretty much selectively or solely using armor piercing on the ship. I don't know why you wouldn't. You have 457 millimeter guns, kind of a no-brainer to me. But if the destroyer wants to get cheeky, or if you have it preloaded because you know someone's going to use radar like a division mate on a smoke screen and the destroyer's in there, yeah, this HE can absolutely slap and devastate enemy destroyers. So definitely want to make use of that too. I actually do go ahead and take the, the gun feeder skill, switch your ammunition types faster, cuts it down to like 9 or 10 seconds, guys. Really useful. I really do like it. Pretty useful skill. Especially when you have 6 guns, you want to make sure you have the right ammunition choice loaded. Armor piercing, 14,500. Again, initial velocity is tying that of your AG at 800 meters a second. I really don't find that I'm having to lead the target any more than I normally would with battleships. It just feels right at home. If you're familiar with how Soviet battleships dispersion, or not dispersion, like guns feel, hey, it's going to transfer pretty damn well. Only thing I want to talk about is because we're directly comparing this to like the Soyuz. The Soyuz does have that pretty nutty cracked Soviet dispersion, especially when it comes to its vertical, when you get in like sub 12 and 11 kilometers. Obviously, you don't have that. So this is just going to be a more consistent battleship at all ranges rather than having to really close the distance. And then you get that kind of cracked dispersion that the Soviets get. That's like the main difference. Also, like the battlecruiser dispersion. Again, it basically just comes down to the dispersion at all the ranges, because the Soviets don't really elapse or pass or surpass the Sun Yat Sen until you get around those 10 to 11 kilometer ranges. You have a secondary battery. Basically, might as well not have a secondary battery. If you want more of a secondary battleship focused or themed, you can go check out the Ying Ming. That has a little bit improved secondary battery dispersion and I guess gunnery. This does not have that. This is going to be your occasional, when you're in knife fight, setting the occasional fire or dealing damage to an enemy destroyer. It's really not going to do you much good, so do not spec into it. You have the airstrike, AA defense. Actually, kind of worth talking about the AA defense here. Not terrible, not anything phenomenal. Flat count of 3+1. Again, long range of 5.8, medium range of 4 kilometers, no short range. Medium is 307, and long range is 60. The reason why it's worth talking about is because you can supplement it with defensive AA fire, which is what you have locked on the ship in a consumable slot. Again, your AA is pretty much not going to do anything unless you proc your defensive AA fire to give it a little bit of a bonus or a boost. It's not going to deter carriers, guys. It will shred the occasional tier 8 aircraft carriers. Squadrons, but again, you run into tier 10 and super carriers, no, it's lights out. You're still very much fodder. You're not really going to be deterring any enemy aircraft carriers, so don't really rely on it that much. Maneuverability, again, with the build that I'm currently using, 28 knots of top speed, 950 meter turning circle radius with 14.9 second rudder shift time, and then detectability by sea, again, without the commander, with I believe just the upgrade and it was 15 kilometers. You take that commander, you get it down to 13.4. Now, looking at our upgrades, again, you know me, damage control party modification 1 in that first slot, kind of a no-brainer. And then if I'm going to create a longer duration of my action time of my damage control party, I'm going to do that. So I think I have it up to 21 seconds, which again is awesome because, you know, submarines with the ping, 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 ping. This is going to kind of nullify that for 21 seconds, which is nice. Damage control systems mod 1 in that second slot. Third slot, aiming systems modification 1, mandatory, absolutely mandatory to get like more consistent dispersion on this thing. Again, trolley salvos will happen. It's a battleship. Live with it and come to the understanding that it's going to happen. But yeah, definitely aiming systems modification 1. Damage control systems modification 2 in the fourth slot. Now this obviously you can take. You don't have to take that. You could probably take propulsion modification 1. Steering gears, nah, doesn't make much sense on this ship. You're not going to turn any faster. I really wouldn't spec into that. And then airstrike modification, that's a dumb skill or dumb upgrade. Propulsion, I understand the logic for that. I want to start and stop a little bit quicker, reach that engine power faster, especially when you're playing in and out of islands and bow tanking. But problem is, I don't really want to bow tank in the ship as much as, you know, I mean, I know you have tankier armor and you have an exposed citadel on your broadside, but I really don't want to bow tank with 4 guns. Matter of fact, because I'm supplementing this with in the 6th slot main battery modification 3, I'm going to go ahead and take damage control systems because I'm going to be in the fray a little bit more. So that's why I'm going to justify taking that. And then obviously concealment systems in modification, concealment systems modification 1 in that 5th slot, kind of a no-brainer for me. Consumables, you have your damage control party, you have a repair party, and you have your defensive AA fire. That is pretty self-explanatory. Again, those are your 3 consumables. I feel like the defensive AA, we're just going to throw it on there because fuck it. Like, the thing needs another consumable and we can sell it as having improved AA defenses. Really not. Don't really pay much mind to that. You really don't have improved AA defenses. Looking at the commander. Again, this is all I have for command. And he's not fully leveled up. But again, I already told you what I would be speccing into if I, you know, if I had my way with this thing, essentially. This is what I would take. Gun feeder. I want to make sure I reduce, you know, have the right shell type loaded when I need it, especially when those destroyers, because your reload is so low anyways with the build. I think that just makes sense. Grease the gears. Adrenaline rush, no brainer. Concealment, fire prevention. I am not taking basic survivability because I've already taken the damage control system or whatever modification in the 4th slot, so I'm not going to double dip on that. Plus, I already have fire prevention, so instead I'm going to get improved repair party readiness. This is going to allow me to have another repair party consumable charge. Plus, 2 million tank damage is in the realms of what I think is plausible on this thing, and I get another charge on top of that. Essentially, this is a Pan-Asian Soyuz that you don't have access to Kuznetsov, and this is basically going to allow you to get access to Kuznetsov with, if you get First Blood, I think you get an extra charge at consumables, right? A defense and ASW expert skill. Looking at the ship consumable preparation time and reload, that applies to your damage control party and your repair party. Defensive AA fire, not really necessary, I guess, and it's going to improve your AA a little bit on top of that. So yay, hooray. And then vigilance because, you know, torpedoes, that's a thing, especially when you're playing up and close in the fray. Medium to closer range is where I play this thing. So again, it's nice to have a skill like vigilance that helps me have a little peace of mind, knowing I can spot incoming torpedoes, you know, 25% further away, and I have a little bit of protection and damage reduction by 7%. So. But yeah, guys, all in all, that is the Sun Yat Sen, a very fun and formidable Tier 9 battleship that I don't think a lot of people play or know about. So hopefully after this review, and with the gameplay I'm going to be showing you here in just a couple seconds, it'll hopefully sway you into saying, wow, I really need to hopefully take this ship out to play again, or I need to go potentially build this ship in a different way or have a different look at the ship, because I actually think the ship is very good, and it doesn't get enough love that it deserves. Okay, without further ado, guys, let's go ahead and get into the battle. Okay, and here we are in battle with the Sun Yat Sen. I do want to point out right out of the gates, I am in a division. I do apologize for that. I usually try to keep my reviews to single player, as I think that's more applicable to more players, but I think this was too good of a game to showcase the pros and cons and what this thing is capable of doing, to not showcase this as the battle for you guys. Also, it was an incredible game that we were able to actually pull this one out. I thought the enemy was definitely going to beat us in this one, but spoiler alert, they don't. All right. Anyways, the Sun Yat Sen in battle. Now, we've already gone over a lot of what this ship is and what this ship can do. And what about the weaknesses of this ship? Well, first things first, you are a battleship, which means RNG is your balancing like thing, okay? Troll salvos will happen, especially with a 6-gun battleship, no matter what the dispersion may be, battle cruiser, Wisconsin cruiser, whatever it is, you're going to have those wonky dispersion salvos from time to time again. And you can't rely and say, oh my God, I hate this ship because I get a bad salvo. It's going to happen, guys. But guess what? The good news is you have a 22.9-second reload, basically 23-second reload, and you get to shoot your guns again. With 457 millimeter guns, that is awesome. A little bit of the Georgia vibe to this thing in that regard. So I guess if you want to say it's like a Georgia, it's not though. I think the Tsurugi is more like the Georgia in my opinion. You know, the weaker armor scheme, picking up the guns and accuracy. But with that being said, if the Georgia is the Tsurugi, then what's the Sun Yat Sen? You know, what's similar to the Sun Yat Sen? And you know, with the 457 millimeter guns, you know, which again is nothing new to tier 9 now. I mean, they've slowly crept them in. It started with the Georgia. I think the Soyuz is a good example of what that is. The Soyuz, in my opinion, is a good ship. And I actually really like the Soyuz. Do I like the Sun Yat Sen better than the Soyuz? Maybe it's just because I like Soviet ships in this game and Pan-Asian ships are kind of a mixed bag for me. At first, that'd be my answer to you, but after playing the Sun Yat Sen a lot, I mean, I've played a lot of games in this thing to get this review going for you guys. I actually really like the Sun Yat Sen, and she might be up there in my top 3 battleships for tier 9. Okay, she's a blast to play, very rewarding, very balanced, and I think if you slip up or outplayed, yeah, you're gonna go back to port pretty damn quickly. What I like about these battleships that are built like this is they have a lot of strength offensively, and don't get me wrong, defensively they have some strengths too, but they can get punished in return. This ship can punish you with its guns, but in return, if you outmaneuver and outplay this ship, you're going to be able to punish this ship and citadel the shit out of this ship, and I like that. From a game balance, kind of era or way, I really like the way that this ship is designed. Okay, moving on into the commander build of the ship. Again, I already mentioned it in the port screen. The one thing that I am taking on this is the fire prevention, but I'm not taking the, what is the skill? Like the damage control, whatever the fuck it's called. The 3 skill, the damage, improved damage repair or whatever it's called. And instead, I'm opting for the other one, the other skill about your repair party readiness or whatever the fuck that is. My thing is that the reason why I'm not doing that is because I've already slotted in my 4th upgrade slot the damage control or the damage module for minus flood and fire by 15%. I don't want to get on top of that to get another 15%. Yeah, I don't want to do that. To me, it just makes more sense to reward yourself for taking damage, which is what you should be doing in this thing anyways in a lot of your battleships. To me, it just makes more sense that way, right? I want to make sure that I am able to be rewarded and have an extra heal up and ready to go when I need it. And essentially by taking a shit ton of damage, which you're seeing in the background, I am, by constant torpedoes as my DDs aren't really doing a good job spotting, that I'm ready to go with that as well, which is super nice. Okay, obviously I don't have the skill here, but when I do have that, I can only see my Sun Yat Sen gameplay being elevated up a little bit more. And then obviously a big discussion I want to talk about is the 6-slot upgrade. Do I go reload or do I go range? And I've watched a fair other, YouTubers talk about, what they think is right. And I don't think there's a wrong choice. I mean, I understand the logic for extending the range, with those engagements. You're not really a DPM style of ship. I mean, I really get it. I honestly get the theory there. To me, from where I'm playing the ship and where I'm finding success with this ship, I would like to reload a little bit quicker, to get my salvos off a little bit quicker, to outtrade opponents. Remember, I only have 6 guns in total, 4 in my nose if I'm actively engaged against an enemy battleship in a brawl. Having that extra, salvo going down range, you know, in 22, 23 seconds rather than 26 and a half or whatever it is it could be life or death for you, right? Rather than, you know, shooting every 26 seconds, right? And I guess standard battleships would be what? Well, I guess probably 26 because they're running the reload, or if you're like American or whatever, 30 or something like around there. So I understand the logic. For me, where I'm playing, you only have 4 guns. I'm making up for that lack of shell count with hopefully a little bit more, or a little bit better DPM. That's why I would go ahead and take the reload in those situations. Again, it's not a wrong choice. There's really not a wrong choice. Maybe the wrong choice would be if you could slot the artillery plotting room mod 3. That would be a wrong choice. But between the reload and range, I don't think there's really a wrong choice with either of the two. I think at the end of the day, you should try out both and see which one you have more success in. From where I'm playing the ship, the sweet spot for me is anywhere between like 16 and 14 kilometers. That's where I find a lot of success with this thing. I think the reload is more than sufficient, in my opinion. I really don't want to be engaging targets past 18 kilometers. I'd really like to close the distance to some degree. And having further range than 19.2 to get out to like 21 or something is like, I don't really care for it. Okay, there's going to be some scenarios where that's going to be applicable, sure. But for the vast majority of the time, we don't want to be, you know, having engagements at that range. Because again, with 6 shells going down range, it's going to be harder to land shells on target than if you're fighting something that has 12 or 16, right? All right, moving on into the next thing about the Soyuz. As of right now, we don't have a Pan-Asian Battleship line. I'm assuming it's probably in the works, would be my guess. I mean, they released the Yingming, which is the latest Tier 9 Pan-Asian Battleship. You have the Sun Yat Sen. So there are a couple battleships that they're throwing around out there for premium variants. So I guess for crew training possibilities, you really don't have. It's pretty limited, unless you're doing it in like hopes in like the next 2 to 3 years. Hey, there's a Pan-Asian Battleship line. Here's my Tier 10 commander. I can just swap over. It is Tier 9 though, so you're gonna get some really good improved credit income and whatnot, which is super nice. But again, you could still use, even if it's a battleship, you could still use it as a crew trainer if you really need to. It's just going to affect the overall playstyle of the ship, but you can do that, which is, again, super nice. It's a good investment, right? Anything else about the Sun Yat Sen that's worth talking about, in my opinion? Why do people not play this ship? Well, one, especially on the NA server, I just think Pan-Asian ships aren't that popular. This thing just isn't very popular, and it really surprises me because people get pretty damn good damage out of this thing, and people get pretty damn good, pretty good win rates out of her as well. I just think it's not popular solely based on the signal flag, and I think from selling it, I think you could buy this ship in the premium store on Cycle, right? I know right now she's in loot containers, and usually every Lunar New Year for the last 2-3 years she's been in loot containers. I don't know if she was ever sold outright. She might have been. Correct me if I'm wrong. But again, I think people would rather buy more historic ships rather than investing in paper ships. I think it's like the big thing. I can't speak for Asia, the Asian server, right? I'm assuming it's probably more popular over there, and I can't speak for the EU server. But for the NA server, to me, I think it's just not as popular because solely based on the flag and not being a historical ship, being more of a paper ship, and I don't think people really want to purchase and invest in play paper ships as much as they would historic vessels. Plus, it's not flying a United States flag, and I think a lot of people on the NA server especially want to play United States ships. That's why it's like, to no surprise, the Montana is the most popular Tier 9 or Tier 10 BB, right, on the server, and I think of the Yamato for its historical value. So yeah, that's kind of my thing why I think it's not played a whole lot. And I also think a lot of people deem like every now and then the troll cell with something like this, right? They're like, oh, look at that dispersion, it's terrible, but like you still hit 2 shells and do a decent amount of damage. But it's like people don't they don't correlate that sometimes. They just see shade dispersion, and I think, like, let's be honest, like the general population isn't like the best at the game. They're still learning, they're still trying to get better, so I think it's kind of that mixed bag. Plus Tier 9 is a very competitive tier. Let's be honest, you're getting up tiered a lot prior to Tier 10 for the vast majority of the time, and if not, God forbid, a super ship. So how does this thing up tier? I think is a big topic of discussion. Honestly, guys, I think this ship up tiers very well. It's tanky. Its guns are hard-hitting and punchy. I really don't see a problem with this in regards to an investment standpoint for, getting yourself a tier 9 premium battleship and then, getting thrown into tier 10 and potentially tier 11s. I think it's a good ship. I think you could definitely get away with it and have some decently good games in her as long as you know how to play battleships and you know your ship. I think there's a good example of what this ship can do, right? It basically bends cruisers over and fucks them over. That's what this thing does. And also, if battleships that can be citadeled, if they can be citadeled, this thing will citadel them because the pen is just so good. I mean, it's packing a lot of penetration at the ranges, like the sweet spot ranges that I talked about, around that 16 to 13 kilometer range. I mean, a lot of penetration, guys. You can definitely schwack a lot of ships and go right through that armor like a fucking hot knife through the butter. One thing I didn't mention on the ship yet, I didn't think I didn't mention this in the port screen, is the turret firing angles. So when you're going forward on the Sun Yat Sen, the turret firing angles going forward are not the best, I believe. I believe the turret firing angle going forward is 28 degrees. Okay, it's manageable, but you're going to have to showcase a lot of side profile like you're seeing here. Which again, you still should be able to ricochet of the vast majority of the shells. Again, unless it's those big heavy guns like 457s or higher, 460s, 510s, like that's when you're starting to get into trouble. But then you could already theoretically be overmatched anyways through the nose. So it's really, you're not really like losing out on anything there. When you are in the kited position, you are picking up that same 28-degree firing angles, which for me, when you're kiting backwards in this thing, it actually seems pretty comfortable to utilize. Again, showing enough side profile that you still could theoretically get punished by big guns, but for a lot of smaller caliber guns, and yes, I'm including like 406s in that, and smaller, they're going to have a hard time dealing with you and your armor scheme because, again, this is a Soyuz. You are coated in, 375 millimeters of effective belt armor, plus if you're angling to increase that threshold, is pretty crazy, right? Really good armor scheme. I really have no complaints about the Soyuz's armor layout at all. I guess the one big weakness of the Soyuz, in my opinion, is you do not have an icebreaker. Thank God for balancing purposes. You have a 32 millimeter nose, but you have a pretty high citadel. So getting citadel through the nose is a thing and can happen. But again, that all depends on the plunging fire, like the impact angle of the ships that they can overmatch 32 millimeters of armor. So like your Yamatos and stuff like that, they need to be probably around like 15, 16 kilometers to really go in and over and go through that to plunge into your citadel. I think the closer you get, it actually gets harder, in my opinion, to do that because of the angle, the way the citadel sits within the water and the nose, and a bunch of different armor schemes and stuff. Not worth really talking about. So it really depends on where you're at. So I guess if you close the distance, again, furthering why I would take the reload and not range, because if I close the distance, yes, he'll do pen damage to me, but actually scoring the Citadel ribbons because of the angle of attack, so to speak, it's still not going to be as reliant as you think. The last thing about the Sun Yat Sen, so I guess this is going into my final thoughts about the Sun Yat Sen. God damn it, guys. I really want you all to go out there and give a go to the ship. If you don't have her, I'm not saying spend money on the game to get her, but I am saying if you're lucky enough to, there's a troll salvo, by the way. If you are lucky enough to have unlocked this ship via loot container, she is awesome. She is a great ship. So hopefully this guide kind of helps steer you and point you in the right direction, especially if you're struggling with this ship. But if you do want to spend the money, and again, it's sadly right now it's all gambling, which again I highly advise you not to take part in. I would say wait until this ship becomes available in the premium store, and then with the coupon, potentially think about picking her up. To me, this ship screamed like coal. I don't know why this ship hasn't been added to the armory for coal, but again, I don't make that decision. That's not for me. Fun guns, fun platform, a blast, a really dark horse of a ship, and hopefully I highlighted all the strengths and weaknesses the ship has, but the ship has a lot going for it, guys, especially in the main artillery portion. Battle cruiser dispersion with sigma of 1.9, you can't really pass that up, guys. It's just really, really strong and does so much good with the occasional trolley salvo here and there to keep it in check, right, for balancing purposes. So anyway, guys, thank you so much for tuning in today's video. Stay tuned for more, and I'll catch you in the next one. Have a good one. Peace out.